The lady was tidying up at the zoo, contemplating how fortunate she was. Sanvi had urgent matters to attend to, so she was in charge of the predators. Normally, she disliked when others shifted their work and responsibility onto her, but not this time. The young lady simply adores predatory animals. They are all aloof and possess an incredible allure. Their grace drives her to madness. She believes they are the most perfect creatures nature has created. The lady even sings serenades to them, simply because she has the opportunity to clean up after their vital processes. Despite the dangerous nature of the job, she finds it appealing. An animal attacked the heroine. She regained consciousness in a forest of sorts. The young lady was certain that the last place she had been was the enclosure, but this location resembled a safari zone more. Different trees adorned her zoo. She couldn't comprehend what was happening. The protagonist didn't find her smartphone, but instead, she saw avian legs in place of her own. She had turned into a crow. The lady understood that not everyone has the chance to be reborn as the main character. But why a bird? Why not at least a predatory animal? The crow didn't know what to do now. What should she do about food? She would have to feast on insects, corpses, and partially decomposed carrion. She wanted to peck out the eyes of whoever had turned her into a bird. The lady could also subsist on nuts and fruits, but such luxuries were absent here. The bird took flight, soaring above the forest. She thought being a crow wasn't too bad. The girl heard someone speaking. She flew towards the sound. Why search for food when she could find a person who would tame her and provide sustenance? There was, of course, a chance that some would reject the bird, as crows are considered birds of ill omen. However, if she managed to capture someone's attention, everything would work out. Upon arriving at the source of the sound, the young lady beheld monsters, not humans. Thanks to them, she was certain that this place was neither South Korea nor the location where the protagonist lived. It was a fantastical world of some kind. The problem was that the orcs she saw were a highly popular race, so it was still unclear whether this was a manhwa, a novel, or a game. The plus side was that the girl understood the language of other creatures. The monsters were searching for a particular person. The crow had to find him before the orcs did. Once she found him, she would warn him of the danger, and then they would take an interest in her. The girl found the person. He was wounded. The young man regretted accepting the invitation to go hunting with Count Fallon. If only he had awakened the divine power of the imperial family within him, this entire situation could have been easily resolved. The young man pondered if this was the end. The girl was certain that she had seen this character somewhere before. The lad beheld a raven, an emblem of demise. He surmised that it awaited his perdition, relishing in his impending doom. The hero desired to drive it away but was unable, for at any moment, orcs could emerge from the thickets. Emitting superfluous sounds should be refrained from. The avian creature commenced its cawing, provoking the lad's ire, as it could potentially disclose his presence. The orcs took notice of it. The raven took flight towards an unknown destination, and the monsters pursued it. Astonished was the hero, for the bird had come to his salvation. The maiden could not recollect where she had encountered the lad, yet she knew she must preserve his life, for he was her sole clue. The heroine led the orcs to a precipice, and they began to berate and scold her. She knew not how to find the lad now. The raven discerned a trail of his blood. It sought herbs to staunch the bleeding, yet the maiden was unfamiliar with their properties. Guided by the bird's intuition, she could differentiate between edible and inedible flora. The heroine embarked upon her search. Meanwhile, by the riverside, the lad cleansed his wound. The water would cleanse away the blood and its scent, making it arduous for the monsters to locate him. He contemplated how the bird, a harbinger of death, had come to his aid. Pondering his next course of action was imperative. Grass, utilized to stem bleeding, fell upon the lad's head. Gazing upward, he beheld the raven perched upon a tree. The lad was profoundly astounded by the bird's remarkable intellect. Why was it assisting him? The maiden brought him berries. He inquired if she wished for him to consume them. The bird cawed. The hero realized it comprehended him. He partook of the berries, their sweetness etching this day deeply within his memory. From this, the strange cohabitation of our heroes began. The crow would find fruits or medicinal herbs and would sometimes warn the young man of dangers, while he would catch fish and rabbits, preparing and sharing them with her. They aided one another, and then the young man gave the bird a name, Rainal. Initially, he cast suspicious glances at the girl, but now his eyes are filled with warmth. An unfamiliar feeling began to blossom deep within the girl's heart. It is something people experience when their idol calls them by name. She enjoyed it when the hero caressed her. Until this moment, everyone around her had tried to deceive or betray her. The young man was astonished to have a creature by his side that filled him with vigor. It is such a delightful sensation that the hero is willing to spend his entire life with her, disregarding the imperial palace and its duties. He would simply live such a life. He yearns for it, but it is not possible. Numerous knights perished for him. The people will suffer due to the tyranny of Llewellyn. He needs to return to the palace. However, if he were to return there in such a state, it is highly likely that the young man will fall into a trap once again. Llewellyn has probably already put a price on his head or declared him missing, assuming his place. He needs to awaken his power in order to attain authority. The proof of being a descendant of the imperial family lies in the imperial force, which manifests as the ability to transform into a wolf. While flying and searching for herbs, the girl saw something glistening. Driven by instincts, she descended. It was a precious stone. Rainal remembered that it was not a gem but a fruit called Crobanrock. Within it lies a power capable of awakening the inner strength of a character. One can obtain such a fruit only once, and the ending of the game will change depending on whom you give the fruit to. This is a highly significant matter. Moreover, if entrusted to a feeble individual, they shall perish, unable to withstand the venom of the fruit. As for you, imprisonment awaits for committing murder. On each occasion, it seemed almost arbitrary, prompting the young lady to often contemplate hurling her phone across the room while engaging in this game. Why has she not once considered the vexing imbalance of this game? The reason is simple. The heroine played it 3 years ago. The only advantage lies in her recollection of the young man. He is Kamut Ebel de Wulfric, one of the selectable characters, the crown prince of the Wulfric Empire. He is currently pursued and wounded. Rainal believes she arrived in this world even before he acquired his rights of succession to the throne. If her memory serves her right, Camille has not yet attained the power of the imperial family, and numerous obstacles lie ahead. It appears the girl is destined to awaken his powers. The fruit must be delivered to him immediately. Perhaps in the future, when he holds authority, the raven will find a way to return to its own realm. The prince was astonished upon seeing the fruit. Even members of the imperial family find it difficult to obtain. He inquired whether the bird was truly neither a dragon nor a cirrus. By consuming this fruit, the young man will either grow stronger, rendering all these obstacles trivial, or he shall perish, unable to contend with its power. He requested that Rainal live a happy life on his behalf, should he meet his demise. Kamut consumed the fruit. The denizens of the forest flee, sensing this energy, deeming it perilous. Indeed, the future crown prince has awakened his powers, and this power has brought forth the heroes of the monsters. The girl failed to comprehend why they arrived at such an inopportune moment. She contemplated fleeing, for Kamut will endure regardless. Rainal diverted the attention of the monsters onto herself. The young man experienced such immense pain that he yearned for death. Yet he must survive to prevent the inevitable. The prince cannot simply perish like that. When God created this world, the sacred beasts that served him were sent to the lands he had fashioned. Wolves were the sole beings capable of exerting their power over creatures fashioned in the likeness of God, so that these humans, in whom divine blood flowed, could wisely govern their people. Kamut regained consciousness. Rainal fell into his arms. He remarked that it was foolish for such an intelligent being to remain on his side. The young man grew weary of his sense of helplessness. He assured her that the bird would soon recover. The girl regained consciousness and found herself bewildered about her whereabouts. She witnessed Kamut engaged in conversation with someone. A certain young man had healed her with magic. The bird became frightened, but the young man reassured her. He disclosed that they were within the residence of one of his devoted knights, where they could momentarily relax. And the young man who healed the raven was a priest. The priest confessed that he never anticipated having to heal a raven, and that if it were not for the prince's request, he would have declined. The young man departed. Kamut embraced Rainal, expressing his profound fear of losing her. Now the girl understood why she was unable to capture the attention of men, for all the birds overshadowed her. She complained that God did not make her the main heroine. The young man became startled when the raven began to flap its wings, fearing he had embraced her too forcefully. But all was well. The prince expressed his gratitude to her, acknowledging that she had aided him in his survival and awakening. He felt remorse for her suffering and promised to always be by her side. The girl silently declared to the women of this world that she would never give up Kamat. She would peck at the girl he would be with until she herself departed. Knight Galenos entered the house and greeted the prince. Kamat apologized for the sudden visit. Ranel recognized him. She could also engage in playful banter with him. However, she did not recall his character. The knight claimed responsibility for not being by the prince's side and was prepared to atone for his guilt by forfeiting his life. The girl was in shock. Handsome men were not permitted to die without her permission. Kamat disarmed Galenos, remarking that while loyalty is commendable, it is better to avoid extremes. He said the young man shouldn't blame himself. The knight couldn't protect the prince because he was on a mission entrusted by the emperor. Kamat was relieved that the young man hadn't sided with Llewellyn. The crown prince stated that if he still felt guilt, then let it become his sword and defend him. The knight vowed to protect the hero, even at the cost of his own life. Observing this, the girl recalled that Galenos had been a loyal knight to Kamat, and no matter what happened, his loyalty remained unwavering. The bird was curious why the young man hadn't mentioned that he had already awakened his power. While sitting at the table, Galenos asked how the prince managed to return safely. Kamat showed him the raven, stating that it had saved him. Prince Kamat had always been flawless, an exceptional individual who cared for his subordinates. He never revealed his weakness to anyone, as the moment he made even a small mistake, his life was endangered by the already awakened third prince, Llewellyn. The knight couldn't believe that the young man he knew from a different perspective was warmly smiling at the bird of death. He knew that his highness was made of different metal, and if a simple raven could recognize this, then Galenos, as the prince's personal knight, should be closer to him. He couldn't yield to a bird. Kamat asked the young man what was happening at the imperial palace. Galenos recounted that while the bodies of knights were found, there were no traces of Llewellyn. Search parties were formed, but all of them were under Llewellyn's control. The third prince said, how could he remain idle when his brother had disappeared? Therefore, at his initiative, the emperor assembled search parties. The prince stated that his younger brother had learned to play the public game. Their conversation seemed eerie to the girl, be that as it may. Allowing one's own sons to fight for the throne, risking their lives, it is excessively cruel. The bird rubbed against the young man's hand, trying to comfort him. He said he was now prepared for anything. He would never allow all the sacrifices to be in vain. Kamat instructed Galenos to return to the palace and inform the emperor that he was alive. The knight mentioned that Llewellyn might do something. The young man replied that initially he wouldn't be able to do anything, as he would pretend to be a loving brother. Ranel couldn't believe that she would end up in the imperial palace. However, she had to stay alert, as it was there that her friend's enemy resided. Now the girl was even glad that she hadn't been reborn as a human, as she would become Kamat's weakness. No one would approve of the fact that the prince had brought along an unknown commoner, and then she, the girl brought by his highness, could easily be used as a hostage. So it was much safer now to remain the devoted pet of the prince. Kamat took the bird and, apologizing, placed it in the cage. He said they would have to endure until they reached the capital. Ranel was indignant. The carriage departed. When the girl worked as a caretaker at the zoo, she often had to transport animals in cages, and each time felt like a battle for life, not for death. And now she found herself in the place of a poor creature. Ranel expressed her outrage loudly. Her head spun sharply, and darkness clouded her eyes. When the girl regained consciousness, the young man said he didn't know it would be so difficult for her. She bit his finger. The prince understood that the bird was very angry. He stroked her, and she forgave him, and she calmed down. Kamat apologized for making the raven suffer, but he had to take her along as he didn't want to leave her behind. The young man said it didn't matter. As long as she didn't abandon him, let her be who she was, and he kissed Ranel on the beak. The raven was surprised. The prince said he had many enemies in the palace. He constantly had to doubt people and consider whom he could trust and whom he couldn't. The only person he could trust was Ranel. The girl understood that this was his moment of weakness, and if she were human, the young man wouldn't reveal this side of himself. Despite the fact that Rainal couldn't help Kamet in any way because she was just a raven, she promised to be on his side. When the heroes arrived at the palace, the prince showed his room to the bird. The girl was fascinated by all the shiny objects, and she wondered if anyone would notice if she stole something. But Rainal realized that once again, she resisted her instincts and composed herself. Kamet said that while he was gone, she should sit quietly to avoid any trouble. He ordered a servant to keep an eye on the raven. The prince instructed the servant to treat the bird as if she were him, otherwise, the servant would face the consequences. The servant poured worms for the bird, but she didn't like them and screeched. Kamet heard it and wondered if he had made a mistake by leaving her behind. He needed to finish his tasks quickly and return. Llewellyn, upon seeing his brother, ran up and started speaking about how worried he had been. He expressed his concerns for him. The younger brother hadn't changed at all. Kamet teased him. He was amazed at what the young man was thinking. The third prince, Llewellyn, received support for one reason only. He had already awakened his powers. Having tasted influence and authority, he made no effort to further his self-improvement or strengthen his position. As a result, he grew arrogant and rather foolish. Even now, Kamet can sense his aura, although he too has awakened. That's precisely why Llewellyn didn't become the rightful heir. The eldest prince said that in the future, he will try to outwit Llewellyn's next mischief even better. But for now, he thanked him for the efforts made to assemble the search parties. Until now, he couldn't adequately resist due to lack of support, but now everything is becoming much more intriguing. Kamet said he needed to go to his father and left. The young man arrived at the bedridden man's side and greeted him. The man mentioned that he heard about his disappearance and was glad everything turned out well. The prince inquired about His Majesty's well-being. The father replied that he was unchanged. He wasn't doing poorly, but he also didn't show signs of improvement. The man stated that what the young man worried about would no longer occur, so they could dispense with pleasantries. The emperor said that Kamet had finally decided to break free from his shell. It was exactly what the person who had stabbed him in the back, namely Llewellyn, feared. As expected, the father immediately recognized that his son had awakened. The prince expressed gratitude to his brother, as he had helped him awaken. In response, the father called them both fools. Kamet stated that he would now strengthen his position, which had been in a precarious state until now. Then the father would be able to relax and reunite with his dearly missed wife. The young man remarked that if their mother hadn't succumbed to illness, the issue of inheritance could have been resolved much more easily and less cruelly. He departed, and the emperor gazed at the portrait of his beloved, contemplating what expression she would have on her face if she saw him now. A wolf chooses a mate for life, and if he loses his partner due to unforeseen circumstances, he will suffer from anguish and ultimately perish, following in their footsteps. The man hoped that his eldest son would soon take his place, bringing an end to this meaningless existence sustained only by a sense of duty. The girl wept in the room because birds have a fast metabolism, and she was very hungry. The servant couldn't understand why the raven wasn't eating its food. Rainal looked at the worms and considered trying them, but she quickly regained her senses. If Kamet didn't return soon, the girl might truly end up satiating herself with worms. Upon returning and noticing the bird in such a state, the young man immediately ordered to bring fruits and fresh meat. After she ate, the prince called her over. He presented her with a box of precious gemstones for her to play with. Rainal was shocked. After all, she was just a raven, not even a particularly attractive bird. He truly loves her. The girl thought how wonderful it would be if it were a love between two human beings. The bird offered Kamet one of the gemstones. It deeply moved him, and he said that when he becomes emperor, he will make the raven the national bird. The young lady soared through the streets. She caught the attention of the gardener, who understood the urgency of driving away the harbinger of death from the prince's garden. His efforts were halted by Kamet, who declared that henceforth this raven must not be disturbed. He warned that the servant would personally answer to him if any harm befell Rainal. The gardener was frightened and departed. The young man realized that the bird could have suffered if it had gone on a little longer. How much longer would he have to warn people? Nevertheless, the hero must ensure that this little creature remains untouched. The girl sensed someone's approach. It was Llewellyn. Camot inquired about his purpose for coming. Llewellyn stated that he simply wanted to enjoy their time together. Raynal found the atmosphere quite somber. The younger brother mentioned that he came because he heard that Camot had asked their father to leave the throne for him. Camot replied that regardless, this matter would have had to be resolved, and someone was destined to be the emperor, while others would perish. Llewellyn expressed disbelief at hearing this from an ignorant person who had not awakened. Camot remarked that his brother was foolish, as during his absence, he could have won over the aristocracy to his side, but he merely boasted about his power. The young man stated that it was he who was the fool, as the first one to awaken but failed to seize such an opportunity. Llewellyn transformed into a wolf and demanded that they settle everything now. He attacked his brother, but Raynal struck him across the face and began to assault him. Camot was surprised, but if he allowed it to continue, the bird would suffer. He halted the skirmish and questioned Llewellyn, asking how he dared enter his garden without permission and attack his companion. The brother retorted for the inferior to keep his mouth shut. Camot replied that he did not yield to him, even if he had not yet awakened, and that he could easily rid himself of Llewellyn. The younger prince proclaimed that things would be different next time. Our hero also pondered this, as he had already awakened, but it was still too early. If he were to claim the throne when his brother had more followers, it would lead to disorder, which he did not desire. So Camot would remove Llewellyn from his path when his support grew stronger. The young man summoned the bird and stated that it would receive a reprimand today, without fail. The young man admonished Raynal in the chamber, as she could have injured herself. Now Llewellyn's pride has been wounded, which is why he may target her. The girl gazed at Camot with an endearing expression, and he wished to apologize for scolding her, but restrained himself. He stated that the bird, just like the previous time when they were attacked by gnolls, hyena-like beings, had behaved recklessly. Raynal's ability to confront monsters or wolves was due to her knowledge of these creatures from her past life, and her confidence in the reflexes of her raven body. However, to the prince, she seemed rash, as he was unaware of this. The young man wondered, could he be overreacting? After all, if Raynal were a dragon or a hybrid, she would easily evade a wolf's attack. However, considering the injuries she sustained back then, it is evident that the raven cannot currently utilize her abilities. There must be some explanation for this. Camot understood that the possibility of Raynal simply being an intelligent bird could not be dismissed. Therefore, he must protect her until he is certain that she can defend herself. The prince told Raynal not to throw herself into harm's way to protect him, risking her life. He did not want to lose her because of someone like Llewellyn. The younger prince was scattering everything in his room. He pondered how, once he ascended the throne, he would eliminate all the ravens in the empire. However, the young man did not understand why Camot was defending her. Previously, he had ignored Camot's taunting of birds and animals. Llewellyn needed to learn more about this bird. The prince approached the mirror and commanded it to create what he desired. As Camot sat in the chamber and worked, a servant entered and announced the arrival of Marquis Namuel. Upon entering, the young man greeted the prince and stated that he had come because the item the prince had ordered was ready. The girl recognized the young man and flew towards him. He was the eldest son of the Duke and a brilliant mage. This character played a very important role. You see, he was the main protagonist of the game. Although, of course, other choices could be made, his storyline was the primary one. Raynal never expected to meet him in person. The Marquis remarked that he had never encountered such a friendly raven before. Camot had never witnessed a raven being so affectionate with others. He began to feel jealous and called the girl to him. She mentally apologized, as she had never intended to betray him. The Marquis stated that he knew ravens were intelligent, but had never seen them obedient to humans. He offered to take her to his laboratory, but our hero defended the bird. The young man presented the prince with a specially crafted magical necklace. The girl wondered if Camot was planning to abandon her and marry someone else. The maiden envisioned the prince making her their offspring, yet the lad adorned a necklace upon a bird. She was greatly astonished by this. The Marquis was appalled. Camot declared it to be a sign of her significance to him, urging the mage to temper his interests in her. The Marquis apologized and expressed his reluctance to dispute with the future emperor. His father had always advised against meddling in politics. He was an unawakened member of the imperial family, having renounced his inheritance. His father wouldn't even cast a glance towards the palace, so as not to entangle himself in unnecessary troubles. The Marquis, too, wished to avoid dealing with hypocritical aristocrats. Thus he chose the path of a mage. However, he can no longer remain idle. To Llewellyn, mages are nothing more than mere instruments akin to the lad. He doesn't even perceive them as humans. The Marquis stated that if such a person were to become the next emperor, the country in which he was born and raised would collapse right before his eyes. The lad has no intention of merely observing this unfold. The prince inquired if the mage is confident that he won't become such a ruler, leading the empire to ruin. The Marquis replied, sensing that he is not that kind of individual. He said that if Kemet finds it difficult to believe his words, he would offer him a crobanrock, producing a fruit. The maiden was astonished. It turns out that in the game, the prince awakens thanks to Namuel, and she was merely fortunate. Kemet asked why the mage himself didn't consume it. The latter replied that he prefers to pursue his own path rather than vie for the throne. Now, our hero can truly ascertain Namuel's pure intentions. He proposed to make a pact. If Kamut ascends to the throne, he will repay the mage for all his assistance, and all the mage's knowledge will be entirely at his disposal. The lads concluded the agreement. When the mage departed, Kemet pondered whom to give the fruit. None came to mind except for Rainel. He wondered what would happen to her if she were to consume it. The maiden snatched the fruit from the lad's hands. He warned her that she might perish, but she had already swallowed it. The lad contemplated that if the awakening were to commence and the maiden couldn't cope, he would bear witness to her demise. If such a scenario were to unfold, the prince would not withstand the loss. Nothing transpired. The lad was relieved that all was well and requested that she refrain from consuming anything suspicious in the future. Rainel couldn't recall how she had ingested the fruit, but judging from Kemet's reaction, she understood that she had done so. The bird sensed a sharp pain coursing through its entire being. Could it awaken? Its body did not radiate light like that of the lad. The raven merely experienced slight fatigue. The prince summoned a physician. The veterinarian stated that the bird bore no physical injuries, but why did it suffer so? The woman asserted that if the issue resided within the body, she would have been able to heal it. Despite Rainel's temperature rapidly rising, there were no internal or external damages. The doctor departed. Kemet held himself accountable for everything. He beseeched her to regain consciousness. The maiden awoke within the dream and was no longer a bird but a human. Had she perished? It was unjust. Rainel felt the wind. Long ago, a black bird that soared close to the sun had aided the wolf, becoming its wings and eyes in the sky, and the black bird, with which the wolf shared its power, was destined to cleanse the land of corpses for the sake of humankind, so that decaying remains wouldn't cause the living to suffer, bringing forth new diseases to the world. Later, the bird gave life to ravens, scattering fragments of eggshells across the earth, so that one day its offspring could consume them and be even closer to the sun. Upon awakening, the lad noticed that the bird had transformed into a maiden. The lad did not comprehend the nature of this maiden, but he noticed an adornment upon her. He discerned her to be Rainel. The prince reached out to her, and she awakened. The maiden observed herself in the mirror. However, her former muscularity was absent. Rainel was entirely transformed from her former self. Now, she no longer had to reside in a cage and struggle against the desire to consume worms. Moreover, all this time, there had been numerous things she longed to do but could not, and now she could embrace Kemet for as long as she desired. Now, they would be able to converse. Rainel wept. The prince inquired if it was due to fear. The heroine wished to confide in him about everything. Yet if she were to reveal all, he would discover that she was a character from a game, and all the misfortunes that befell him were intentionally orchestrated for the amusement of some and the suffering of others. Rainel could not disclose such information to him. Therefore, she stated that she was afraid of perishing because of the Krobarok. The lad expressed that he felt the same way. He did not know what would become of him if she were to perish. Kemet embraced the maiden, conveying his profound happiness. The prince thanked her for not abandoning him. He had previously overwhelmed her with his tenderness, But now she was human. The maiden believed she looked comical as her eyes were swollen from weeping. Kemet believed she was uncomfortable with their embrace, but the truth was that he still regarded her as a creature, while she had already become a human. Rainal's heart was on the verge of bursting from overwhelming emotions. She contemplated that it would be rather pleasant to transform into a raven, and so the maiden turned into a bird. The maiden failed to comprehend why she had once again transformed into a bird. The lad caught her and urged her to regain her senses. He surmised that she was probably shaken by the reverse transformation, but with a little more practice, all would be well. The prince demonstrated to her the art of transformation and asked her to replicate it. Rainal remained baffled. Kemet assured her that she would succeed if she focused on who she desired to become. The heroine managed to accomplish the feat. The lad and the maiden sat at the table and dined. The prince noticed that Rainal adeptly handled the utensils and inquired if she had observed others. The maiden lied, asserting that she had indeed done so. Once she had finished eating, Kemet requested her to assume the form of a raven, as it was necessary for the servants to tidy up. After the servants had departed, Kemet apologized to the heroine, explaining that due to his selfishness, he was compelled to ask her to conceal her human form. There was a specific reason for this. The lad expressed his desire to make a request of her. He asked her to prioritize her own safety. This caught the maiden off guard. The prince divulged that his brother was haughty and covetous, and if he took a liking to something, he would desire to possess it. The lad stated that it was perilous to be a human within the imperial palace. He requested Rainal to wait. Kemet promised that he would create a place where she would no longer need to hide. The maiden inquired if she could be of assistance to him. The lad agreed. Throughout all this, Llewellyn observed them through a crystal ball. The unknown man contemplated how the first prince managed to return, considering he had done everything to prevent it. Moreover, Kemet declared his intentions to become the crown prince to the emperor. Was the man's decision truly incorrect? The aristocrats support Llewellyn only because he has awakened. After all, the image of a wolf has always been considered noble. According to legend, only the heir of the sacred wolf blood can become a worthy ruler of the empire. This was also stated by Carleon, a powerful representative and mercenary of the tiger people. He is one of the platinum mercenaries, of which there are only 5 on this continent. No one dared to question the words of such an authoritative figure. That is why the man had to support Prince Llewellyn. He believed that even a lack of ruling abilities would not be a problem if they were to assist and uphold him. The unknown man believed it was the only way if he desired the empire's further prosperity. The man didn't know what to do. Marcus Wilhelm, as he was called, came to the first prince and discovered a crow on his shoulder, which greatly surprised him. Kemet asked why the man, who was his brother's right-hand man, called for him. Wilhelm stated that he did not regret his actions and did not come here seeking forgiveness. Back then, he believed it was the only correct decision. Thus, the man would have aided Prince Llewellyn and fulfilled his duties. The young man asked what had changed now. He said that Wilhelm chose the one who awakened to be his right-hand man, but in the end, he was discarded and used. And now, without any other choice, the man came to him. Wilhelm understood that the young man was the prince, possessing all the qualities of a future emperor. Wilhelm admitted that he made the wrong decision and now must pay for his actions. He said he would accept any punishment. Kemet replied that he could not trust him. His oath of loyalty to him would now be seen as betrayal. Not only now, but also in the future, the man will repeatedly face distrust and disdain directed towards him. The young man inquired if he could endure it and not be a rat on a sinking ship. Wilhelm replied that if the ship were to sink, he would go down with it. Sitting in the prince's garden, the young lady asked why he spared the one who wanted to kill him. The young man responded that it was akin to making advantageous investments in a happy future. The aristocrats who side with Llewellyn will be greatly shaken by this, and the number of those who wish to follow him will increase. Rainal asked if Kemet was not angry with the man. The answer was affirmative, but he cannot afford to incur losses due to momentary emotional impulses. Furthermore, thanks to Wilhelm, the young man met her. The hero asked why the young lady helped him back then. She lied, claiming that she saw his golden hair and decided to assist him. Rainal never imagined he would think of her as a hybrid or a dragon. The young man stated that if she liked his hair, he should take better care of it to ensure that Rainal never ceases to love him. The prince embraced the young lady, who became flustered and transformed into a crow. The young lady pondered on finding a way to help him. In the future, Kamut will become the emperor, upon whom the well-being and fate of the entire nation will depend, and the ominous bird of death will only contribute to acquiring a bad reputation. Kamut conveyed to Galenos that he faced a predicament, uncertain of how to proceed. The young man even struggled to articulate it. The knight inquired about his concerns. Due to Marquis Wilhelm's defection to the prince's side, turmoil had erupted within the palace. Llewellyn had never suspected that the Marquis held such significance within his own faction. But now he would come to realize it. Many neutral aristocrats had begun clandestinely aligning themselves with Kamut, gradually augmenting His Highness's influence. Galenos pondered over the distress plaguing his lord, as everything seemed to be progressing optimally. However, the prince disclosed that Rainal no longer wished to accompany him. She had always been devoted to him, yet today she declared her intention to remain in her chambers. When he recently implored her to accompany him, the maiden refused. The knight believed it to be his fault, and that the raven deliberately acted this way. Thus, it was imperative to save Kamut and facilitate his forgetfulness. The knight acknowledged his limited comprehension of animal emotions, yet he would always fulfill the prince's desires and remain by his side. Within the young man's chamber, cleaning was underway, observed by the bird. It contemplated the desirability of engaging in meaningful pursuits and being of utility. On the day Marquis Wilhelm sided with Kamut, the maiden resolved to maintain her distance, albeit only for a limited duration, rather than indefinitely, and it proved to be the correct decision. The prince asserted that Llewellyn's aristocrats would be astonished, and many would be enticed to join his cause. Consequently, his schedule would become more crowded, as he had foretold. The raven pondered how others would react if a bird of death perched upon his shoulder. She had witnessed numerous reactions, rarely encountering delight. Unfounded antipathy lurked within their gazes, which she struggled to comprehend. Although Rainal lacked understanding of the world's intricacies, one thing was clear: such disdainful looks certainly did not aid Kamut's ascension to the imperial throne. Hence, for now, she merely needed to remain confined to her chamber. She was incapable of idleness. Initially, the maiden contemplated observing the household staff. Nevertheless, no matter how foolish the young prince might be, he would not assign someone who performs their role poorly. Therefore, even if his pawns were present, she would be unable to discern them. The maiden realized that she wouldn't be able to accomplish anything magnificent because she was constrained in her actions. Hence, she could simply endeavor to forge connections with the individuals she presently encounters. Rainal fluttered toward the maid with a blossom, but the latter became greatly startled. The bird presented her with the flower, which astonished her greatly. It will be arduous to instantaneously dispel all the stereotypes about ravens. However, if the raven manages to bring joy to someone, then eventually everything will assuredly improve. The prince witnessed this scene and declared that the maid could keep the flower. The maiden was shocked, all thanks to the bird of death. She wondered if she had been excessively biased against it. Left alone with Rainal, the lad inquired if she accompanied him merely to bestow the flower upon the maid. The maiden replied that she believes she is unlikable to others and that she repels them. Hence, she resolved to alter people's opinions of her, as even the prince initially regarded her with suspicion. Kamut apologized and queried whether there exists a brighter being in the world than she. He stated that it matters not what others think, for fate has brought them together. The young man said that if someone were to avoid him solely because of the maiden, then is it even worth engaging with such an individual? He beseeched her not to shun him on account of others. The prince declared that he would do anything for her and asked what Rainal desires at present. In accordance with her raven instincts, the maiden requested companionship for herself. The young man replied that he is unable to do so. The maiden inquired why. He himself did not understand. Perhaps it was his greed. The bird can assume a human form, but it was born and raised as a raven. Hence, it is entirely natural for her to desire a raven as her partner. However, the prince will not allow anyone to take his little bird away. If the maiden desires this, then he needs to find the finest raven in the empire, and that will be difficult to accomplish. Kamut was not fond of this idea, for in this world, there is no one who would be worthy of his Rainal. The young man stated that he too could be her partner if she wishes. He desired to kiss her, but the maiden became flustered and transformed into a raven. The prince laughed. Rainal was not ready for such a proposal. Kamut feels free and carefree only when he is by Rainal's side. The struggle for the throne, disagreements among the aristocrats, distrust of those around him, deeply ingrained in him, even the fear of death. All of this seems so meaningless. Holding the maiden's hand and witnessing such a genuine smile, touching hair resembling the night sky, and gazing into those violet eyes, the prince feels that even death itself has blessed him because he possesses the courage to do anything for her. When all threats disappear, the young man will surely tell her something. Ultimately, the maiden was unable to convince Kamut otherwise, so she remained in the study with him. When she surveyed the room, many things had changed, and she became brighter. The prince clearly did it not for himself. She must ask him why. Since Galenos was outside the door, Rainal could quickly transform back into a human. When the maiden mentioned this to the young man, he was shocked because he did not request the new decor. The prince instructed the knight to summon Marquis Namuel. When the mage arrived, he stated that the vase contained a recording sphere. It is a magical artifact that records events over a specific period of time. Fortunately, it does not record sound. Kamut immediately understood that his brother was responsible for this. Furthermore, it is not ordinary magic, but rather illusion magic, indicating that a powerful mage performed it. In the office, there were a total of 5 recording spheres. The young lady sensed that she was once again embroiled in a political struggle. Namuel stated that it would be prudent to rid themselves of unnecessary clutter. He mentioned that as long as they remained safe, and Llewellyn remained unaware of their knowledge, since the spheres had consumed their recording time, they were in no danger. Galenos, once again, blamed himself for the prince's peril. The mage advised checking Kamut's room for similar artifacts. Ultimately, the recording spheres were discovered in the young man's room, causing a commotion in the palace. The maid, to whom the bird had presented a flower, thought it unwise to bring these items into the prince's chamber. However, Llewellyn insisted that it was necessary for the well-being of her ailing brother. She wondered what would become of him now. All the servants are currently under guard. Kamut believed that his brother posed a threat to them, so he promised them protection. He summoned someone and instructed him to keep an eye on Oberkammergor. Furthermore, the young man was to ensure the faithful execution of his orders. While the spheres were destroyed, the young man remained unaware of the identity of the mage who had aligned himself with the younger prince. Typically, senior mages detest being manipulated and avoid involvement in politics. It is clear why Llewellyn readily released Wilhelm. He has more influential connections. If he wants to kill Kamut, it means he desires to play the role of a noble. As long as the emperor is alive, he will adhere to the rules of the court. However, the young man must be more cautious. There are other pitfalls. He does not know how much his brother knows about his secrets. Fortunately, the awakening is still a mystery to him. If Llewellyn were aware, he would have reacted immediately. Thus, luck is on the side of the hero. Rainal, too, had often been a person, but recently she had started hiding and observing everything. She was deeply shocked by what was happening. The young man told her that she could come out of the closet since everything was safe now, and understood what was happening. She had to gather herself and reassure everyone that everything was fine. But her body wouldn't cooperate. Everything was in order when they checked the rooms, so why? Rainal realized that she hadn't transformed into a human since she felt fear. She debated with herself. The young man was concerned that the girl refused to eat or come out. He wondered if she didn't trust him anymore. Kamut said he would be gone for a short while and instructed the bird to ensure that the girl ate. She descended to eat, and before her stood the mage. When the young lady regained consciousness, she found herself disoriented, yet she overheard a conversation taking place. It was Llewellyn conversing with her captor. The mage had departed. The junior prince took hold of the bird's wing, stating the need for an introduction. He declared that he would forgive her if she transformed into a human. The raven pecked at his face and protested. The young man then cast her into a cage. The young lady pondered the importance of being more vigilant regarding the individuals in the room and noting any subtleties, but it was already too late. Even so, she wouldn't have been able to perceive the spheres. Survival must be her primary focus now. The prince remarked that Kemet wouldn't save her, as a barrier had been erected in the room, allowing only a select few to enter. Meanwhile, our hero, Namduel, and Galenos endeavored to break the barrier. Kemet descended into the underground prison and informed the servants that he knew some were capable of entering his brother's room. He acknowledged that Llewellyn had coerced him into assisting, and this person had effortlessly disposed of his loyal right hand, indicating the potential fate of others. The servant, who had received the flower as a gift, grasped the implication. The prince assured them that he wouldn't abandon them and pleaded for their assistance, as Llewellyn had abducted a creature precious to him. The young lady contemplated offering her help. Meanwhile, the junior prince informed the raven that no one came for her, thus suggesting that she should transform. The young lady considered whether she should listen to him. However, witnessing how he treated her as a mere plaything, she felt the urge to confront him, even if victory was unattainable. The prince inquired if she would decide more swiftly if he were to break a couple of her limbs. At that moment, Kemet entered the room. Llewellyn was astonished by the fact that his brother managed to enter the room. The servant claimed responsibility, stating that she had opened the door. The junior prince couldn't even recall the person he had threatened. He referred to Kemet as a fool who trusted no one and had rallied a crowd, despite his own incompetence. Our protagonist inquired whether the brother had utilized the same individuals and requested their assistance. He remarked that a bungler in magic, such as Llewellyn, would never have been capable of erecting such a barrier himself. The junior prince was entirely dependent on others. The young man questioned who he was without his power and what else he possessed. He declared that the brother would remain lonely for the rest of his life. Llewellyn warned him not to dare speak in such a manner. He threatened to tear the raven to shreds if she meant so much to the young man. Kemet's initial plan involved Namduel and Galenos joining forces and seizing the junior prince while he was distracted, keeping his awakening a secret. However, the prince couldn't allow his words to come to fruition. Our protagonist transformed into a wolf, just like his brother, and attacked him. The brother was deeply frightened and couldn't believe what was happening, especially since the elder prince was massive in size. The servant reported that Rainel was severely injured. The young man reverted back to his human form and approached the raven. He picked her up and carried her to the healer. Galenos inquired about Kemet's intentions now. Kemet replied that he had promised to protect the bird and now had to take responsibility for what had occurred. He stated that he would declare a bosquert. According to an ancient tradition, tracing its origins back to the imperial family of Wulfric, under the watchful eye of the emperor, a sacred bloody battle takes place, in which two heirs to the throne engage in combat disguised as wolves, until one emerges victorious. Sustaining grave injuries in this ordeal is as easy as can be, and a momentary lapse could even cost one's life. However, deceit and trickery have no place in the aristocratic arena. The victor earns the right to inherit the throne. Thus, this battle is reserved as a measure of last resort and is only invoked upon the awakening of several heirs. In the palace, everyone discussed the events of the previous day. The method of declaring bankruptcy is remarkably simple. All one needs to do is address the wolf, providing evidence of their divine bloodline, and declare war with a resounding roar that reaches the ears of all within the imperial court. The weight of this moment was palpable. The emperor emerged from the palace and announced that for now, Llewellyn would not be able to partake in the fight, as he needed to recover. He declared that a date for the duel would be set once the younger son regained his strength. Henceforth, the father proclaimed that until the victor of the bankruptcy was determined, any schemes and interventions were strictly prohibited. All aristocrats now fell under the scrutiny of the imperial family, and anyone who defied their orders would pay with their life. A handmaiden tended to a raven. The prince remarked that she must be accustomed to such tasks. The girl replied that she had often cared for her brother, but thanks to the priest sent by Kemet, he was much improved. In order to repay the priest for his kindness, she would now attend to Rainel. Our heroine regained consciousness within her own mind. She pondered that perhaps the prince was worried about her and desired her return. However, her avian instinct warned her that it was not yet time to go back. If she were to venture out now, she might frighten Kemet, as animals instinctively avoid those resembling their tormentors. The girl remembered instances when an animal, abused by a tall person, grew wary of all tall individuals. But princes are different. Ranelle declared that even if she were to startle the young man, she wanted to conquer this fear herself. Her avian instinct agreed, but reminded her not to forget that she was the embodiment of the raven, and her thoughts were its thoughts. The girl awakened and embraced Kemet. The young lady offered her apologies for causing the young man to worry. The handmaiden was shocked to discover that the raven was a human being. The girl expressed regret for creating such disorder. Had she not agreed to Llewellyn's request, Ranelle would not have suffered. The handmaiden berated herself. Ranelle instructed her not to speak in such a manner. The heroine explained that just before losing consciousness, she heard it was the chambermaid who had allowed Kemet into the room. The girl stated that as a raven, she was unfamiliar with the intricacies of the local class structure, but she believed it took great courage to make such a decision. Ranelle likened the situation to a rabbit attacking a wolf in the animal world. If the handmaiden had not agreed, the younger prince would have employed someone else to set up the recording spheres. The girl acknowledged that without the maid's bravery, she wouldn't have had her hand held. Kemet suggested that the girl become Ranelle's chambermaid. Both the heroine and the handmaiden were delighted, and the maid introduced herself. Her name was Nadia. She expressed eternal gratitude to our heroes for what they had done for her. When the girl departed, Ranelle was surprised that she didn't even want to go home. When Kemet recounted the bankruptcy, the girl trembled and asked him why he was taking such risks. The young man reassured her, saying that she was not involved and that he was merely advancing the day that had to come. The girl realized that she unconsciously avoided the prince when he leaned in to embrace her. The young man transformed into a wolf, and everything was fine. He explained that when the girl was unconscious, the priest had spoken about possible psychological consequences. The prince expressed his relief that the bankruptcy had been postponed, allowing him to assist Ranelle in her recovery. He assured her that she could rely on him. Ranelle burst into tears, confessing that she had been very frightened. Kelenos asked Namuel if he knew that the prince had awakened. The young man replied that he suspected it, given that he had given him Krobenrock. The knight couldn't understand why he hadn't been informed. Today, he fought particularly fiercely during training. Kelenos pondered whether he truly had not earned even a shred of trust. Since childhood, Kelenos had aspired to be a knight. He admired the first prince, who embodied the ideals of sword and shield. However, due to the prince's reclusive nature, it took Kelenos quite some time to become his knight. The knight considered it a mere misunderstanding, assuming that the prince was simply too occupied to divulge everything. If the knight hadn't trusted Kelenos, he wouldn't have allowed him to stay by his side. As the knight entered the boy's chamber, he observed a crow perched atop a wolf, peacefully slumbering. The prince had transformed into a human, cradling the bird in his hands. He promptly noticed Kelenos' distress and inquired about its cause. The knight recalled his mentor's advice to approach the third prince, yet he chose the first instead. This decision sparked widespread discussion. The young lad reminisced about compelling everyone to search for Kemet, eventually embarking on the quest himself. Regrettably, he failed to locate Kemet, but managed to return unscathed, accompanied by the crow. Nevertheless, his actions upon returning were nothing more than peculiar whims. Kelenos queried Kemet if he had revealed awakening to save the bird. The young man even summoned his brother to a tete-a-tete. The knight inquired, "What distinguishes this raven?" The prince expressed his regrets, stating that it was not as if he was unaware of the knight's unwavering loyalty. The true stroke of fortune for him lay in having such a faithful knight by his side, even though he himself was incapable of rousing from his slumber. Kemet revealed that he had recently been attacked and nearly killed, thus he could only apologize for his excessive caution. The young man expressed his remorse over Kelenos discovering his awakening in such a manner. The prince understood why the knight failed to comprehend why the raven held such significance for him. As for Kelenos, it was merely a pet. Kemet explained that he had intended to divulge everything later, but chose to disclose it now. He implored the bird to metamorphose, and once again it assumed its avian form. The prince recounted the entirety of Ranel's tale and how she had saved him from the clutches of death. He also beseeched his loyal protector to defend her, affirming that it symbolized his complete trust. Gelenos knew that the prince had never displayed a particular interest in women. The man with an icy gaze, who allowed no one to approach him, unexpectedly requested the knight to safeguard the young lady. Gelenos' anxiety dissolved entirely, and now, as a true knight, he would stride boldly into the future alongside the prince. The young man realized that a wedding of heroes and their offspring awaited him in the future. He vowed to carry out the prince's command. While sitting together in a chamber, the magician revealed that he had found no mention of a tête-à-tête. Even an exhaustive search through all the documents proved futile for His Highness. Gelenos failed to comprehend why nothing could be found. He was on the verge of severing the book, but Namuel intervened. Marquis Wilhelm asserted that any records regarding a tête-à-tête were forbidden, thus it was not worth their time. The young men believed he intended to hinder them, but the gentleman assured them of his allegiance. He inquired if they were aware that the current emperor was the victor of the tête-à-tête. The gentleman stated that he still remembers that day. Perhaps the prohibition of tête-à-tête records is due to the excessive shedding of imperial noble blood during that time. The battle was merciless, transforming such a tragedy into a spectacle or chronicling it. Gelenos asked why he was being told this. Is he attempting to instill fear? Wilhelm stated that he would not have embarked on this entire journey for the sake of those who would be frightened by it. He merely desires that the future emperor spill as little blood as possible. Prince Llewellyn, undoubtedly, will strive for victory at any cost, thus necessitating preparation for all manner of stratagems. The gentleman stated that he cannot interfere since all trickery and machinations are forbidden. Wilhelm advised the young men to seek information not from records of the imperial family, but from their subordinates. He departed, wishing them good luck. From the early morning, Gelenos awakened the prince and informed him of the need for training. The young man asked if he was not forbidden from assisting. Gelenos stated that according to records, the emperor's personal knight would engage in combat with His Majesty every single day until he fell ill. This implies that they even fought during the period of the tête-à-tête. Additionally, Marquis Namuel, relying on records from bygone years, decided to monitor other magicians to ensure they do not engage in deception, and to journey to the Tower of Magic to ascertain which senior mage aided Llewellyn. The prince asked if it would not be too dangerous. He worries that they may encounter misfortune because of him. Raynal metamorphosed and said that sparing was a rather good idea. Kemet stated that they should exercise caution since they know little about Llewellyn's intentions. The girl remarked that no matter how strong a beast may be, its demise is merely a matter of time. She had witnessed the death of many wild animals throughout her life. Sometimes they perished at the hands of those much weaker than them, and at other times they lost their lives in an instant due to a small wound that refused to heal. Nature is often ruthless, and if one desires to survive, one must occasionally resort to deceitful and cowardly tactics. Raynal expressed her sole wish for the prince to survive and embraced him. The young man requested the preparation of a training ground. The heroes trained while the raven observed. The girl suddenly realized that she was not human, and therefore, whatever mischief her mind might conceive, it would not contradict the rules of the tête-à-tête. She contemplated why she shouldn't spy on Llewellyn. However, she was repelled by the thought that her actions could ruin everything. The raven overheard two birds conversing and attempted to engage them in conversation, but found them insolent. The bird didn't know how to persuade them. Llewellyn pondered in his room about the possibility of losing. The magician reassured him, saying that he would find a way and assist him. Raynal beseeched Naughty for diminutive cookies, no larger than a pinky, to feed the birds. The maid affirmed that she would fulfill the request. The small avian creatures were astounded that the raven conversed with them, for usually only their own kind comprehended their language. They inquired if she had consumed the luminous fruit. The response was affirmative. One of the birds recounted that there used to be another raven in this palace who had consumed the fruit and would come here with his human companion. The girl expressed her desire to meet him. The birds cautioned that it would be unlikely since his whereabouts were unknown, and he disliked being the subject of gossip. They suggested that the raven could search for him herself. The girl contemplated that once the tête-à-tête concluded, she would commence her quest. The birds asked about the subject of her desired conversation. When the prince fell, Galenos inquired about the cause of his distraction. The young man replied that he was perturbed by Rainal's frequent chattering with other birds as of late. The knight advised Kama to concentrate on the battle instead of succumbing to jealousy. The young man imagined other ravens flocking to the raven. Galenos stated that if it troubled him so, he would rid himself of the birds. The prince interjected, insisting that they were not his rivals. After the training session, the girl divulged her request to other birds to keep an eye on Llewellyn. In return, she would reward them with cookies. Nadi faced challenges, prompting Rainal to request a raise for her. The young man apologized, but the girl failed to comprehend the reason behind it. He expressed that if he did not exist, she could soar freely in the sky without any worries or anxieties. The young man claimed that his very existence caused her suffering. Even upon awakening, the prince could not fathom the reality of his own power, for he had always been helpless and frightened. If this struggle merely inflicts pain upon his allies and beloved companion, what should he do? Kamat stated that if it weren't for him, she would be happy. The girl asserted that it was not because the prince was pitiful, but because she wanted to help him. Rainal asked how she could stand aside when the one who was incredibly dear to her engaged in battle. The girl implored the young man never to speak like that again. The reason she remained here, even though she could fly anywhere, was that the bird was content by his side. Kamut expressed that he would always remember this, for the raven was his savior, the one who healed his heart. None of the mages whom Manuel wanted to seek assistance from were willing to involve themselves in politics. As for the elders, it was difficult to even approach them, let alone meet with them. He pondered who the mage of the third prince could be. It would be beneficial to have even a small hint. Meanwhile, the birds clandestinely observed Llewellyn. Galenos, Nadia, and Kemet observed as the birds perched on the windowsill, indulging in the delicacies of cookies, with a raven nearby. The knight remarked on the brilliance of utilizing birds as their spies. The servant praised her mistress's magnificence. Galenos expressed the urgency to train Nadia in risking her life for their lady. The girl responded that she would sacrifice her life to learn. Rainal concluded her conversation, and the prince hurried towards her. She conveyed that she had received highly reliable information. The girl began to caw, and no one understood her. They asked her to speak again, but she continued to say, caw, caw, caw. The prince admitted his inability to comprehend the language of birds and requested a human translation. The girl apologized and revealed that according to the bird's words, Llewellyn regularly meets with a certain man. There was no specific description of his appearance, but the birds mentioned that he had long facial hair, presumably a beard. According to them, there was something in his voice that made the birds uncomfortable. He emanated a profoundly unpleasant energy, as if not from this world, and if one did not avoid such magic, trouble could ensue. The girl asked if this information was sufficient to identify the mage. Kamut affirmed that it was enough. Namuel stated that only one elder mage, Buphalos, could wield such magic. If rumors were to be believed, he delved into the magic of the demon realm. If such a person sided with the third prince, they must take countermeasures without violating the rules of Boscruet. After all, the heroes were unaware of the tricks they intended to employ during the bloody battle. Marcus Namuel inquired about the source of this information from the prince. Had he not used the shadow? The young man clarified that he could not employ it due to the rules of Boscruet, so he had dispatched someone else to handle his primary duties. This time, a different informant was at work, a highly reliable source. Meanwhile, the raven maintained its position at the window, for the birds desired more cookies. She sought help from Nadia, but the latter did not comprehend her and pondered on the multitude of friends their lady possessed. During dinner, Rainal sensed a different atmosphere, although Kamut did not give it away. She remembered that today marked the beginning of the Boscruet. The thought that this dinner could be the prince's last made her nauseous. Boscruet, a battle of wolves, not for survival, but for death. It must not be approached like an ordinary wolf fight. All predators exercise caution when it comes to their bodies, and if they realize they cannot win, they accept defeat and retreat to avoid more serious injuries. After all, if the wounds are severe, they won't be able to hunt and will die of starvation. It is wiser to perceive this situation as a battle to the death between humans in wolf's clothing. Even if you surrender, the enemy will gnaw at you until they grow tired, or until they are convinced that the last drop of blood has left your body. Rainal strongly wishes to prevent Kemet's beautiful golden fur from being stained scarlet with blood. The prince reassured her, stating that thanks to her information, he was able to take countermeasures. The young man suggested that if the girl is so concerned, she could perform a ritual for good luck. She inquired about the nature of this ritual. The hero simply asked her to close her eyes briefly. He kissed her and asked if she would allow him to do so appropriately. If the prince were to emerge victorious, the heroine transformed into a raven. The young man laughed. He would definitely survive for her sake. The emperor proclaimed the commencement of the Boscruet.